Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The United Nations warns in a new report the world's on pace to blow past a critical global heating threshold by the early 2030s unless nations take immediate and dramatic steps to mitigate the climate catastrophe. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said Monday the planet's on course to warm by an average of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels within a decade, causing irreversible damage to human populations and ecosystems. The report warns of worsening heat waves, flooding, drought, rising sea levels, famine, mass extinction, and the spread of infectious diseases. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres announced the findings Monday, saying a livable future for all is still possible if nations take urgent action.
The 1.5-degree limit is achievable, but it will take a quantum leap in climate action. This report is a clarion call to massively fast-track climate efforts by every country and every sector and on every time frame. In short, our world needs climate action on all fronts, everything, everywhere, all at once.
Here in the United States, climate activists have organized a day of action today against key banks they say are fueling global heating. We'll have more on the IPCC report and today's protests after headlines. New research finds drought killed 43,000 people in Somalia last year, while leaving 5 million people with acute food shortages. Nearly 2 million children remain at risk of malnutrition. Humanitarian aid groups and climate scientists warn Somalia and other parts of the Horn of Africa face a 6th consecutive failed rainy season, and conditions this year are even worse than 2011, when famine killed an estimated 250,000 people in Somalia. Russia's defense ministry says it scrambled a fighter jet Monday to intercept a pair of U.S. Air Force B-52 bombers flying over the Baltic Sea. The Russian fighter reportedly returned to its base after the nuclear-capable U.S. bombers moved away from Russia's border. The incident came as Ukraine's defense ministry said it destroyed a train carrying cruise missiles bound for Russia's Black Sea Fleet at a station in the Russian-annexed Crimean Peninsula. In Brussels, European Union ministers agreed Monday to provide Ukraine with 1 million artillery shells over the next year while replenishing their own stockpiles of ammunition. Meanwhile, the Biden administration approved a new $350 million military aid package for Ukraine. The U.S. State Department said Monday all sides committed war crimes and crimes against humanity during the recent conflict in northern Ethiopia. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced the findings from Washington, D.C. Monday, just days after his return from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, where Blinken met with the Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, and representatives of the Tigray People's Liberation Front.
The conflict in northern Ethiopia was devastating. Men, women, and children were killed. Women and girls were subject to horrific forms of sexual violence. Thousands were forcibly displaced from their homes. Entire communities were specifically targeted based on their ethnicity. Many of these actions were not random or a mere byproduct of war. They were calculated and deliberate.
Blinken stopped short of stating the Ethiopian government's atrocities in Tigray constituted genocide. In Kenya, police tear-gassed a convoy carrying opposition leader Raila Odinga in the capital, Nairobi, Monday, as he led protests against President William Ruto's government and high inflation. A university student was reportedly shot dead at a demonstration in the city of Kisumu. They were some of the largest anti-government protests in Kenya since Odinga narrowly lost to Ruto last August. In South Africa, thousands of protesters marched in cities nationwide Monday, demanding President Cyril Ramaphosa resign over widespread unemployment and rolling blackouts. South Africa's National Police Agency said officers had arrested more than 550 protesters since Sunday. About half of all young people in South Africa are unemployed. Meanwhile, South Africa's public electric utility continues to impose rolling blackouts of up to 10 hours a day as demand for electricity exceeds supply. The French government narrowly survived a pair of no-confidence votes in Parliament Monday after President Emmanuel Macron rammed through an unpopular law by executive fiat, raising the retirement age from 62 to 64. The failure of the no-confidence votes sparked fresh protests across France, with police firing tear gas at demonstrators in Lille and Bordeaux, and protesters setting piles of uncollected trash on fire in central Paris. This is French Member of Parliament Mathilde Panot speaking just after Monday's vote.
As you could have understood, the hundreds of thousands of people who are now gathering together every day in the entire country since last Thursday, and since Macron bypassed the assembly, will not stop just because this motion of no confidence has barely failed, just lacking 9 little votes. Nothing has been fixed in the country, and the country continues to head towards a political crisis that Macron himself started.
Unions and French opposition parties have called a 9th nationwide day of strikes and protests Thursday. In Washington, D.C., a federal jury has found 4 members of the far-right Oath Keepers militia group guilty of felony and misdemeanor charges, including obstructing an official proceeding over their roles in the January 6th Capitol insurrection. The 4 faced prison terms of up to 20 years. Their convictions on Monday came as federal prosecutors in a separate trial rested their case against former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio and 4 other defendants who face charges of seditious conspiracy. Amazon's announced plans to lay off 9,000 more workers in the coming weeks. The layoffs build on 18,000 job cuts at Amazon that began in November and extended into January. U.S. high-tech firms have laid off more than 300,000 workers this year. In Los Angeles, tens of thousands of school custodians, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, and other school support staff have begun a 3-day strike demanding dignified working conditions and living wages after nearly a year of negotiations with the Los Angeles Unified School District. Their union is calling for at least a 30% income increase, as school staff only makes an average of $25,000 annually, or roughly $12 per hour. Tens of thousands of L.A. teachers have joined the strike in solidarity. And here in New York, dozens of community organizers, parents, teachers, and students rallied at a Bronx high school Monday, protesting a military recruitment and job fair event hosted by New York Congress members Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Adriano Espaillat. The so-called Student Services Fair featured representatives from military service academies for the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard. Advocates accused Ocasio-Cortez of backtracking on her anti-war campaign promises and policies opposing predatory military recruitment tactics that predominantly target Black, Latinx, and low-income students. In 2020, Ocasio-Cortez proposed a ban against military recruitment on the online gaming platform Twitch, while she later pushed for a bill amendment that would have halted federal funding for military recruitment in middle and high schools. This is Richie Marino, an organizer with the Bronx Anti-War Coalition, at Monday's rally at Renaissance High School, which took place on the 20th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Iraq.
A lot of youth here are struggling to find jobs. Many youth here are not prepared to go to college, right? Instead of bringing military recruiters here, we should be having a jobs fair. We should be having a college fair. Renaissance High School is an arts and theater school. Where are the arts and theater programs represented here, AOC? You're saying this is a student services fair. Where are the services for the youth?
Richie Marino was speaking with Democracy Now!'s Sanji Lopez. Organizers also demanded justice for Vanessa Guillen and Ana Basilio Ruiz, 2 Latino women who were killed after they reported being sexually assaulted at Fort Hood Army Base in Texas. Guillen in 2020, Ruiz last week, and 21-year-old Abdul Latifu, who was murdered in January by another soldier at Fort Rucker in Alabama. Latifu was from the Bronx. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.